I'm going to introduce the panelists and get them to switch their cameras on as I do so. So kicking off with Georgina Freeman. Georgina, amongst other things, is experienced in terms of being a mini-pupil at Pump Court Tax Chambers. So Georgina, studying at the London campus, is now appearing on screen. Welcome, Georgina. Sarah Gibbons, who is based in Manchester, is also here on screen, and Sarah is a paralegal in the International Department of Leigh. So a very warm welcome to Sarah. Natalie Cernuschi is Bristol based, and she is a future trainee solicitor at Bevan Brittan. And we might well have one more panelist later on. Don't think they've arrived just yet, but 4 is a bonus. 3 is absolutely great. And we should hopefully hear some really powerful insights from these individuals. So welcome all, and as I say, please do drop additional questions into the chat box so we can make this really live and interactive. But the first question, and I'm going to ask this to each of our panelists, I won't necessarily do that for every question. If we get bombarded, we'll try and skip around between us and give the answers. But I'm going to start off and perhaps posing to Georgina first. We had a question that came in from Neil, and it was around about the fact that awareness of each of you coming at this from a different angle, different set of ambitions, different journey, and different ultimate route that you will take. So I guess it gives you a little bit of a chance to position yourself as an individual, your journey thus far. Why have you chosen this particular route? Why are you heading in the direction that you're heading in? Georgina, over to you.
So my journey wasn't the conventional university LPC training contract or bar journey. I actually applied to university but didn't accept any of my places and actually took a level 3 Silex apprenticeship at a local law firm in Leeds where I was living during the time. And I really wanted to start by getting stuck in and getting some hands-on work experience after being, doing your GCSEs and then your A-levels and being in school for such a long time. I was ready to just go out there and give my all to it. And from day one, I had client exposure. I was sitting in on partner meetings and shadowing what they were doing and really learning firsthand what the corporate world is, how a law firm runs, what the business of a law firm is. And through progressing into 3 firms and then almost being a little bit of a reversey Percy and coming back to the University of Law, I realised that actually being a solicitor wasn't for me, and I wanted to go down the bar route. But I only knew that route from the journey that I'd had, and I'd been lucky enough to have through being in a solicitor's firm or firms for so long. So that's pretty much my journey. And now obviously I'm going down the bar route because I've now been able to study other subjects other than the commercial property, residential conveyancing, and wills and probate that I'd previously been practicing in.
That's fantastic, Georgina. And you've already set the bar very high for phrases of the evening. Reversey Percy, that's already written down on my list as something to take away from this evening. Sarah, putting the pressure on you to come up with an introduction that, again, just gives our audience an understanding of you and your journey to this point in your career.
Yeah, sure. So, I also did a law degree initially, but I actually just finished my degree without any clear idea of what I wanted to do. And I felt that I wanted to spend some time figuring out what that looked like, what kind of role I might be able to kind of find that used the law degree, but I wasn't convinced necessarily that I wanted to do that as either a solicitor or a barrister. So I took a bit of time to travel and to try a few different jobs, and then sort of as I was going along got sort of dragged back. It sounds like that was unwilling, but it was a willing drag. And actually it was that law really was kind of at the foundation of what I was interested in and where I thought my role was going to be in terms of my career. But in the meantime, I'd done a master's in international development, and that sort of helped me realise that actually I wanted to combine those 2 things, and that then then some time I lived in Zambia for a couple of years, again kind of working in the legal for legal research, and I was really sort of jealous of my colleagues who were qualified lawyers, and it just gave them those extra opportunities that I wasn't able to get involved in, having not qualified. So so that's then when I decided that I wanted to train to be a solicitor, and then that's kind of led me to where I am now.
Well, that's great, Sarah. And again, a sort of example that it doesn't happen automatically, that suddenly you get told this is what's going to happen in the future. You sometimes stumble across it. You sometimes get dragged back to it. And lo and behold, you then realize that you're in the right place when you get there. So thank you very much for your introduction. Natalie, over to you. Your story in terms of where you've come from and where you're going.
Yeah, so I think I was quite lucky. From quite a young age, I already knew I wanted to go into law and become a solicitor. And I didn't really have any friends or family that had a career in law or knew much about law. So I knew from the beginning it was really important for me to apply to various schemes that were available and get as much work experience as possible to really get an understanding of how I was going to, work my way into law. So I joined many organisations from GCSE level, really, like Pathways to Law and Aspiring Solicitors, just to gain a better understanding of the different areas of law and what kind of firm I wanted to work at. And then I did the straight law, so I went to Cardiff University, did straight law there. And then, even leaving university, I still didn't really have an idea of what area I wanted to go to. And despite having experience, I knew I needed to get paralegal experience to get real life, experience from a law firm. So I worked a year as a paralegal in 2 different jobs. And then I think that was the year that I really, started applying for training contracts where I believed that they were a suitable firm for me, my values and ambitions, and got my training contract from there. And I decided to do my LPC, and I've now gone back to work prior to starting my training contract.
Fantastic. Really good insights from each of our panelists, and a little bit of something different for everybody really to delve into. And so if you have got questions, either a specific one for one of the panelists that you think, oh, I'd like to find out more about why she did that or something, then please do pose it. If there's a more general question, then do also throw that in. Clearly, if we've got bar related questions, I shall throw them in Georgina's direction, and anything about Zambia is definitely going towards Sarah, and Natalie can cover us off in terms of paralegal experience and Cardiff and Bristol. So our second question is a generic question, and therefore I think it's probably appropriate to come across to each of you. Sarah, I'll come to you first, and I'm going to ask each of you sort of for a top tip. I guess a lot of our audience tonight are sort of looking slightly envious at you and thinking, you've got it all mapped out, you know where you're going, you know what you're doing. And for many of them, they'll be thinking, how can I be in their shoes in a year or two's time? So one of the questions that's come in from Helen is about what you could do to be increasing your employability prospects or your employment prospects right now. And I guess also perhaps to take some of the thoughts that you might have already suggested, that it could be something that actually is about what you do in the next 12 months or 18 months, rather than saying you've got to do it now, because clearly, if studies are prevailing, then it's difficult to be able to combine too many things. But a top tip on what people could be doing now or in the relatively short term, kicking off with Sarah.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I'd suggest maybe is, if you do have an idea of maybe the type of role that you are interested in doing, maybe have a look at the application form and the types of questions that you would be asked, or if you had to write a cover letter, and not saying that you would apply kind of in advance of when you were thinking, but maybe use that as an opportunity to work out where you think your gaps are. So I know sometimes with applications you can have like a list of competencies or person specifications that they're really looking for, or even for training contracts, it'll say, this is the type of person that we're looking for, and maybe go through and say, okay, yeah, I've got an experience that would match with that, or I've got an example that I could use for that, and then look for something that you don't feel as confident at being able to answer strongly, and maybe think, okay, then what can I do that would help me to fill that gap? And I think that helps to sort of tailor the type of activities, or whether that's extracurricular or employment or whatever it might be, to give you those skills. And I think it also maybe helps you to figure out something that you would enjoy doing that will give you those skills as well. So rather than thinking I've absolutely got to get paralegal experience or I have no chance of getting a training contract, it's not necessarily the case. I don't think. It's maybe more like, okay, I don't have these particular skills. So I'm going to do this activity. It's going to give me those skills and I'm going to enjoy it at the same time. So that would be my
great advice. And I guess we've also got to put that perhaps into the context of what we heard from Dan earlier on in terms of the O-shaped lawyer, and perhaps some of the skills that maybe, are just needing to be looked at in a slightly different way. We're communicating tonight, but we're not communicating in the way that we might have done 12 months ago. So perhaps the ability to, to become more sophisticated in the use of virtual technology and better interacting with people in that way. So teamwork as well, when you've got people that you're working with not round a table but round a series of screens. So again, perhaps be thinking in the modern times. Natalie, your perspective on that question about what people could be doing now to boost their employability skills and therefore their employment prospects.
Yeah, so I think for me, it would be just from the very beginning, just really take every opportunity as it comes. I think there's such a wide variety of experiences and insights you can take. So, for example, throughout university, sign up to all the pro bono projects and participate in all the societies and I think, one thing I did was apply for brand ambassador schemes. And I think, there's so many opportunities out there. I think each one will really, bring transferable skills for applications. And it's just one thing to remember in the interviews, you're going to be asked, a lot of competency questions. So you will need individual answers and a wide variety of experiences to be able to answer those. So I think just ensuring that you've got a diverse range of experience is really important, and just also try and think outside the box. So contact local law firms or organisations around you, see if there's any opportunities available, attend insight days at firms and really utilise the resources online, like Legal Cheek and Chamber Student Guide and Aspiring Solicitors, because they offer so many great opportunities, not only just work experience, but also mock interview help and application help. So I think, my advice would just be to try and get as much experience as possible, because especially if you're not sure on what area of law you want to focus in, that will really give you an idea of what sectors interest you and really enable you to show your strengths and weaknesses.
Thank you, Natalie. So seizing opportunities is the key. And as Natalie says, there are lots of opportunities out there. But I also think that point about sort of almost, thinking outside the box and creating opportunities is quite good. One of the other panelists that we had hoped to have along, and I'll speak on her behalf because she's not here yet, Gabriella, she spotted a sort of moment of opportunity to help the local community during lockdown and started producing small food parcels, only to discover that lots of people really like them and willing to pay for them. And suddenly there was an opportunity there to develop a whole new skill set in terms of running a mini business. So again, that came out of trying to find a good thing to do, and B, development of skills, but probably that's taken off in a direction that has probably made the CV far more strong as a result of it. Georgina, over to you. Your top tips, what would you give as advice to people if they want to strengthen their current position?
I think I'd really echo what Natalie had said in terms of getting involved with pro bono and attending online events as well. But something that I personally took away from it was don't apply for everything. It's very easy as a student to think I'm going to apply for every opportunity that I can and put everything down on my CV so it looks like I'm really, really busy. That's a big no-go zone, because at the end of the day, your grades are very, very important still. And if you're focusing so much on increasing your employability and that you're constantly busy and you don't really have time to focus on your studies, that can be quite a dangerous trap. But still look at pro bono, apply for things that really interest you, because if they interest you, you're going to enjoy it and you're going to be able to talk passionately about it in the interviews that you get coming up. I think in terms of the bar related activities have been far and few between at the start of the pandemic, but as things have progressed, a lot of chambers have started to do open days, and you can ask questions in advance, you can ask questions on the evening, and depending at what stage you are at of your degree as well, if you've joined one of the inns, they have quite a lot of open evenings, or almost ask the bencher evenings as well, where you can go in and ask any question that you'd like that's concerning you, whether it's pupillage applications, whether it's about imposter syndrome, whether it's, oh, I'm not quite sure if my grades are good enough. What do you think? Anything that you like. So really keep an eye out for those as well. And then mooting and debating. If you're going to the bar, being on your feet and being confident in the way that you deliver your argument is so important. And the more practice you get at this and putting your skeletons together, the more prepared that you will be when you come to submit the application for the bar training course at the end of your degree.
And Georgina, a specific question here to you from someone who is obviously thinking about the bar, but is, I guess, somewhat nervous on the basis of what you hear on the grapevine and indeed beyond the grapevine of it's so difficult to get pupillage. Is it worth giving it a go, or is it just too impossible? You must have confronted that question yourself and thought, do I invest the time, the effort, the money, the energy into doing something where statistically a lot of people will not make it? So what's your advice to someone who's sort of mulling it over at this point and really wants to do it, but perhaps is put off by the reputation that more will struggle than perhaps will succeed?
I think you have to be sure academically and confident in your ability that you will succeed at the bar. If you don't believe in yourself, nobody else will. That's point number one. And secondly, when you come to apply for the bar course, regardless as to what provider it is, and especially at the University of Law, because the process to apply is quite rigorous, the university that you apply to put you through a selection process. And if they don't believe you've got the skills or anything like that to be a barrister, they will let you know how you can improve. And then if you reapply for the bar course the next year because you weren't quite ready that year, that's just a year of improvement. But I think you've really got to believe in yourself that you can do it, and just keep going. Don't give up, because I will not lie to you, rejection is hard. And it's not the fact that you get that generic email from a set of chambers that says, I'm really sorry you've been unsuccessful in your pupillage. It's the hours and hours that you've spent putting together the application and the amount of times that you've written on Pupillage Gateway why you want to be a barrister that hits. It's not that one email that's automated, it's everything that comes with it. But the bar is tough. Everybody knows it. But if you think you can do it and you've been successful in getting on a place on the bar course, you can do it.
Georgina says it, you can do it. So I think that's a great message. And if you're going to go for it, you've got to go for it 100%. We've had a question come into the chat box. So thank you, Chelsea, for raising that. And it's related to paralegal. So it works well to ask both Sarah and Natalie. Natalie, perhaps if I come to you first, the question that Chelsea's asking is, when you apply for a role, perhaps as a legal assistant or a paralegal, deep down at that point, you may well want to be applying for a training contract. Do you give that information that your ambition is actually to go above and beyond the job that you're actually applying for, or do you rein that in? So what would your advice be to Chelsea?
I think from what I recall, most of my applications, I probably didn't mention that, but I think that was only because the questions can be quite specific. It's not really necessary to say that you are looking to become a solicitor, but I think almost in a paralegal role it's almost presumed that you do want to become a solicitor, because it is quite common knowledge that you work. Most people will have to work as a paralegal to gain experience, ultimately to qualify. But maybe a couple of times I might have mentioned it, but I don't really see anything wrong with mentioning it from my perspective. I think, I'm sure the employer will expect that from you anyway, and won't be put off by that, because a paralegal role is always great first experience. And from the employers I've worked with, they're quite aware that everyone wants to become a solicitor. And in my first interview, my first question was, will you offer me a training contract? So I think they expect it, so I wouldn't worry too much about mentioning it.
Yeah, I think probably ambition is a good thing to be showing, and I think probably more so now than ever before, the expectation is that it's more likely to go in via the paralegal route and then get a training contract rather than land the training contract immediately. Sarah, do you have anything further to add in terms of the degree of ambition that you show if you're actually applying for a different job? How much do you show that actually you don't want that job, you want a different one?
It's obviously some kind of maybe going to be a difficult balance. I suppose it is worth thinking about, maybe if you're applying for a position that's a fixed term, and then actually you'd be looking for a training contract after that fixed term. There's obviously then doesn't seem to be any problem with that. I think I mentioned it in my application. I mentioned that I was doing the LPC part-time when I was applying for my current position. So that obviously sort of outs me as wanting to be a solicitor in the future. And actually in the interview, that was a question they'd asked about how I would be able to balance a full-time job and the LPC on part-time. So that gave me the opportunity to talk about skills like, managing my time and how I was able to kind of be flexible if I needed to meet deadlines and all these kind of different things. So it gave me an opportunity to sort of demonstrate some skills by mentioning that I was studying towards the LPC. The other thing I just mentioned is what somebody actually from the careers department from the University of Law mentioned to me when I'd sent my covering letter to be reviewed, is they'd asked me whether the firm specifically did or didn't recruit its trainees from its paralegals, because some firms exclusively recruit from their paralegals and don't take external candidates, and others don't recruit their trainees from their paralegals because they want their paralegals they want like a strong team of paralegals who will be there for a long time. So I think when you're applying, it's definitely worth seeing if you can find out that information, so then you're not kind of sort of putting yourself at a disadvantage from the beginning.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and I hope, Chelsea, that answers your question. If other people have got further questions on a similar topic or a totally different topic, do pop them into the chat box and we'll try and come along to them. The next question, I'd feel very bad about picking any of our panelists to answer the question, but they may have some thoughts, and therefore if they wish to volunteer it, they may, but I will start by answering it. It's about mature students and career changers and what their thoughts are around the likelihood of success, and obviously in the context here of somebody who perhaps has not been successful so far. My own view on this is perhaps that the profession is responding positively to the disruption caused by COVID in looking at what the right answer might be. And this is probably across the whole diversity agenda, inclusivity and equality being such a topical area. And also, I think the realization that more and more people have had to work from home. If it's your first time working and you haven't got that office experience, then it's a really difficult thing both for you to do, but also for somebody to manage you in that way. And therefore, people who have been there and done a little bit will perhaps be seen as able to adapt a little bit more effectively. The question that is always in the mind of recruiters when you're interviewing a candidate who is in the mature or career changer bracket is often, are they really going to stick at this? But more so, how will they deal with younger people who might be managing them? Now, of course, that question cannot be asked directly. It would be a discriminatory question. So you probably have to confront it fairly positively. There's a slight doubt in the mind. How is this person going to be? Are they going to be all right working with younger people? You have to be really forthright in your conviction that you say, oh, by the way, in case you're worried, this is a fact that you can be absolutely confident. I'll have no issues whatsoever. Here's the times that I've worked with younger people and it's been absolutely perfect. So you have to confront it head on, because in your own mind, you must be thinking about what are those relative weaknesses. Sarah mentioned, if you're looking about developing your skills, identify the things you're not quite so good at, the things you don't want to be asked about in the interview. And likewise, for a career changer, a mature student, in the back of their mind in the interviewer is just that question mark about will it be all right? And therefore, you've got to make sure they go away thinking, right, that question mark has been struck off. Georgina, Natalie, Sarah, is there any advice you would like to offer in the context of mature or career changing students?
I think this could be potentially where the two professions separate, because as a barrister, you are self-employed. So quite a lot of the work, yes, you're in chambers and you are part of a collegiate atmosphere, but you are self-employed. So it is your work that you have to do. So regardless as to your age, bar, sometimes it can have a few more attributes and skills that you can transfer from your previous role then to the bar. And similarly, if you've come straight out of university, you might actually want to gain some of those experiences that somebody in your collegiate chambers has had that maybe was a career changer. So I think that they can both complement each other very well. But I know when you work in a solicitor's firm, when I was a paralegal, it was a very teamwork orientated atmosphere. So that could be potentially where the two professions differentiate. But either way, everyone can learn from each other. So I don't think it should be anything different, regardless of your age.
Thank you very much, Georgina. We've had a series of questions come in, Femi, Nicholas, Olivia, amongst others, referencing the pandemic and just what the impact that has been on the profession generally and on the likelihood of being able to achieve success. And I guess what people are looking for here is how can you stand out? It's more competitive. There are perhaps more people looking for slots. We've had the Legal Cheek virtual vacation scheme this week with 4,000 people on it. And the question they've all been asking is, if all 4,000 put on our CV that we've been on this scheme, how are we going to stand out compared to the other 3,999? So what can people do to stand out in the context of the pandemic and the fact that it perhaps has reduced the opportunity to get some of the work experience and opportunities you might have liked? What would you offer by way of advice? So Sarah, I'll put you on the spot first and see if you've got some thoughts on that topic.
Yeah, I think the reality is that it is really difficult, and that especially if maybe firms have had like a recruiting freeze for some part of the year as well, there is the potential that sort of there's more people applying in this sort of year's round, if you like, of things. But I think don't be disheartened by it, because I think if you approach applications for whatever types of opportunities in the mindset that there's so many other people, there's no way I'm going to get it, that your application is going to sort of come with that sort of negative vibe, if you like, if that's even a thing that can come across. But I think if you're really committed and interested in applying to whatever it is that you're applying to, then if that passion and conviction comes through, then that's the best that you can offer. And I think don't think of it as always just that sort of one way, trying to convince whoever it is that you would be the best person for whatever opportunity it is. But you're also trying to work out what is the best opportunity for you that would be that would kind of give you the most satisfaction on a day-to-day basis. So I think just go into it really just giving it your best shot. I think avoid just churning out like loads of applications, because I don't think necessarily it's always a numbers game, because I think you do really need to think about how you fit with either the firm, or even like if it's a volunteering opportunity, then you still need to be able to demonstrate that you'd be the best person, that you would really contribute a lot to whatever it is. So I think when you have the kind of interest and the commitment and the passion for whatever it is, and that will come through, and you'll probably find it easier to do those applications. So yeah, just don't be disheartened and just keep trying. I think that goes back to what one of the speakers was saying. I think it's just like take any rejections as an opportunity to learn and grow and be resilient for the next time.
Thank you, Sarah. I mean, Natalie, it's always been competitive. You've always had to stand out, but you have managed to stand out during COVID-19 to secure your future trainee role at Bevan Brittan. So, perhaps give an indication. What do you think you've done to stand out? What can other people learn by your example?
I think, well, especially throughout the pandemic, I think it's really important. I first of all think that employers and law firms perhaps looking at a different set of skills now as well as a result of the pandemic. I think they're looking for like adaptability and initiative and perseverance. So it's really important, as Sarah said, not to be disheartened, and just to remember that it is extremely competitive, and to just keep persevering. But I think for me, what will make you stand out even more is to really highlight how you've utilised the time throughout the pandemic, and even if that's not looking for jobs, and remember to always take a break. That's what I did. There was a few months where I really struggled, and it is hard, and I just took about a month out, and I did some self-care, and and it's really important to do that, because I learnt new hobbies. I learnt to play chess. I couldn't believe that. I did some online courses. There's some really great free courses online that you can do. And I used what I did within that month, within my applications, showed initiative, highlighted exactly what I did and all the transferable skills I learned. And I think that's what employers are looking for. They want to see how you've adapted and how committed you are to the job. And even if it's not academic, even if it's something that you've done to relax a bit after your LPC or focused on yourself, just show that, explain what's come of that, how that's helped you, how you've grown as a person, and what impact it's had on you. Because I think everything that you do is transferable, whether that's academic or not. So really just focus on what you've done throughout the pandemic, and I think you can transfer a lot of experience to applications. And yeah.
Thank you, Natalie. And I think it's definitely worth emphasising one of the points you made there. It's so easy to get caught up in the hurly-burly of just going from one thing to the next, that taking some time out is a really valuable thing. And that reference to self-care, I think a lot of people will be nodding and thinking, yes, it's a lot easier said than done. And I think perhaps as a collective unit, we all need to be thinking much more about how we can recharge the batteries and have that self-care. So I think that's a really important point that you've made. Georgina, we've already reflected on the fact that it's competitive to get into the bar. So what more can one do at this time to stand out if we're following through this question in a bar context?
I would say, when we first started this overall discussion and we introduced ourselves, you will notice that we're all very different people, and no one person will be the same, as cliche.
I think we might have seen Georgina freeze at that moment, that crucial moment when she was about to give us that perfect insight as to what you can do to stand out if you're in the bar. We'll come back to Georgina. Oh no, Georgina's coming back.
It was my my internet. I can't remember where I was up to, but yeah, I was saying everyone's experience of the pandemic will be different, and we will all have dealt with it differently as well. And whether you've learned to play chess like Natalie, or whether you decided you were going to do yoga every morning, or learn a new skill, or do online courses, I think what you've done personally through the pandemic, you need to apply to your applications and transfer those skills over, because your journey isn't the same as anybody else's, as you learned when we introduced ourselves at the beginning of the talk.
I think all three of these individuals are going to be very successful. I particularly like Georgina's. She's going to succeed at the bar. She listens to what other people said. She quotes them back of what they've said earlier on. That attention to detail is absolutely spot on. We've had another question come through from Adam. We've only got about 10 minutes to go before we're going to break off into networking. So do grab the chance to pose that question. But Adam has really sort of posed the question around, how did you decide which firm to go for, which employer to go for? What made it stand out? I suspect that in this competitive world, it would be fair to say that many people wouldn't be too fussed. They would have perhaps a priority order, but there may well be several firms that you would gladly say yes to. But what is the key thing? Let's start with Natalie in terms of Bevan Brittan. Nobody from Bevan Brittan's listening tonight, so you can be quite honest with us. What was it about that particular firm that made you think, yeah, that's the one for me?
Well, I think what initially attracted the firm to me was obviously that it's quite a large emphasis on public sector work. Having worked as a defendant lawyer for the NHS and also in charity organisations, I really just wanted to continue working with local authorities and governments, and that was what really drew me into Bevan Brittan. But I think also I really wanted to, having done a lot of applications for training contracts, I realised I did want that good work-life balance. And I wanted a mid-sized commercial firm where I could achieve that. And I think Bevan Brittan were just extremely friendly and welcoming from the beginning, and really put an emphasis on their values and ensuring the well-being of their staff and that work-life balance that I wanted. So that was really attractive to me. And I think it was the only interview where, as soon as I got into the assessment centre, I just knew it was the firm for me. It's almost like that when you do, when you look around at universities and you just know which one's right for you. And that's how I felt with Bevan Brittan. I just connect with them on a personal level as well. And I think it's really important. That's why, not just to apply to, it's not as, quality, not quantity, not to apply to, loads of applications, because it's so important to find a firm that's really suited to you as a person, to your values and your ambitions. And I think that's what I really found in Bevan Brittan. I think ever since my interview, I've been in touch with them. I've gone to all their Christmas parties, and they've really welcomed me in. And I've, even before starting there, I felt like part of the firm. So I think it's just important to, really understand what you're looking for, and then find a firm that suits that.
Perfect, thank you. This is always the case with these things. As we get towards the end, suddenly the questions start coming in thick and fast. So I'm going to ask Sarah the question about Leigh Day, but ask you to be quite punchy if you can be, because we've got some more questions to get onto. So what was the one thing that really stood out to you about Leigh Day?
Yeah, so I guess I can be quite punchy, because when I was in Zambia, Leigh Day were working on a case on behalf of a group of Zambian villagers, and so that's where I heard about them first, and I followed them in that case when whilst I was there, and so I got to learn more about them and had that kind of experience of kind of living in the context in which they were bringing this case. And then I just sort of learned more about the international department that they had there. And then when a paralegal position came up in that department, then I just knew that I absolutely wanted to join, and felt then that I had some very relevant experience to be able to talk about, and that obviously helped, I think. So
the Zambia connection was great. That's a nice sort of bringing us round from where you made your introduction in terms of that part of your background. Skipping on then to a question from Mira, which I'll throw in Georgina's direction, which is really around the extracurricular activities. You've got to balance these, because you can't be doing too many when you've got other things that are competing for your valuable time. But what sort of things do you think are useful for people to do that will enhance their chances of success?
So I always get involved with mooting and debating. Obviously, I've mentioned before, you're going to do a lot of it on the bar course, but the sooner you get involved, the better. Your confidence will grow, and I just really enjoy it. I like a good debate. But then also alongside that, I do dance to try and keep myself active, and rather than run on a treadmill, it keeps me a little bit more engaged with other people as well. So I think even though your academic extracurriculars and the societies at university are very important, things like the student law review, where you can write your articles and really getting involved with your ins, I also think it's really important that you do extracurriculars that are your personal interests, like me with ballet and dance. So I go down to Pineapple in London when I'm not at university or at work, and even then the skills what I learned there may transfer over to something that I do that's bar related. You never know, but do things that you enjoy and do it well.
Certainly, if you're looking to try and boost your CV with sort of relevant legal activities, then perhaps joining the relevant societies within the university or something that gives you that is helpful. But I think Georgina's point about doing things you enjoy are really useful. You do need to think about how useful it might be in applications. If you're doing something that perhaps has no direct relevance, then just do it for the sake of enjoyment. But bear in mind, sometimes you do things in your spare time that actually are consistent with you as a person. And for the eagle-eyed, you can see a couple of pictures behind me of cricket grounds, and that's my passion. I'm the chair of a cricket club, and I spend a lot of time working with the young cricketers. So, in reality, what I do is I coach, support, and develop young cricketers. What do I do at the University of Law? Well, I coach, support, and develop the next generation of legal professionals. Actually, the stuff that I do in my spare time shows that that's what is the thing that really drives me as a person, and I enjoy doing those. What's more, in CV terms, it actually says that what I do at the weekend makes me better at what I do during the week. So I can sell that as a skill. So you can see I'm in the right job in terms of the way I try and position everything you do with a motive to it. But again, doing things that give you the energy flow, the opportunity to meet other people, and to just get a break away from perhaps the intensity of constantly talking about the subject matter is really important. We're moving on to questions about online study and perhaps the impact of the pandemic in terms of online working moving forward. Sarah, can I throw into your direction the question around what do you think employers will think about in terms of people who've studied degrees in a slightly unconventional way as a result of this, although online degrees have existed for many years, and what do you think the implications are for the world of work about the balance between perhaps working in an office and still being able to do things remotely moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably quite a standard question that I imagine is going to keep coming up in interviews is how you have adapted to working in a digital environment, and how do you feel about starting in a job completely remotely, which is what I did, for example, is quite strange and different. And so you'd have to be able to explain how you feel like you wouldn't kind of be daunted by that, or you've had experience in all sorts of different virtual platforms. So being able to say, if you've studied online, then you can obviously be able to say that you've worked with maybe like small groups on your course all remotely, you've interacted with your tutors remotely, all those types of skills would be important to demonstrate. And I think it's also probably going to be that a lot of employers are probably unlikely to go back to 100% working from an office. So there might be a more flexible approach to working from home some days in the week and working from the office in other days. And I think that's a real benefit, because I think lots of people would actually quite like to hang on to some of the working from home, because you get into a bit of a swing of it. And so, yeah, I think address it head on also, that because you appreciate that it's going to be something that firms are going to be thinking about, or employers in whatever context are going to be needing to want from their applicants in terms of having the skills to be able to adapt. And if you do think that you aren't confident in some kind of online platform, or you're not sure how you would navigate something, then now's a really good time to figure that out. Ask people that do you know how to use Slack or Teams or whatever the platform is, and then upskill in the meantime, because then it also, again, you're showing taking the initiative to be able to fill that gap.
Thank you, Sarah. We're just 2 minutes away now from the end of the live proceedings before we move off into the expo. So I'm going to answer one final question that I think is important to do, and then I'm going to ask each of the panelists to give their final top tip, if they haven't said something already that they feel is their top tip, to give a new one, or just to regurgitate something they've said earlier on. So that will be your finale. You've got a couple of moments to think about it. But we've had a few questions around people who perhaps have had academics struggles, or a blip, or perhaps are not sitting on the best academics, what the impact of that is. And I think the reality is that with such large volumes of applications, many employers are still going to be picking off candidates on the basis of some of their academics, whether it's UCAS points or degrees. But I think increasingly they're going to be moving to a world in which that's going to change. We've got a generation coming through now whose GCSEs and A-levels are going to be not asterisked in a negative sense, but simply they didn't take exams in the same way as their predecessors. And whether it's teacher assessed grades or other mechanisms, I think employers will perhaps say, well, maybe we just need to to be less focused on those things and concentrate more on, dare I say, the O-shaped skills that were mentioned earlier on by Dan. So I think there's probably going to be an evolution over the next few years, and it may well be that right now that starts, and therefore ultimately you don't end up going into a workplace to sit an exam. It's a good barometer of your intellectual capability, but the reality is you go there to serve clients, to solve problems, to integrate with colleagues and work effectively and productively. So those wider skills will still be important. The advice, I think, is to look very carefully. If an employer says we only accept people with certain grades, then probably you might have to change your sights, not lower your sights, but change your sights to people who say, actually, that's not a key differentiator for us. We're looking for those that have got the wider values that we want, and the employability skills that make the difference. So be attentive and recognize that maybe you need to narrow down your chase, but it need not be something that you concede as being a weaker look. It's just different. Okay, final comments then. We'll start with Georgina. What would be your final top tip to our audience before we head off into the expo?
I would say acknowledge who you are and keep going, because you will get there.
Short, simple, very powerful. Thank you, Georgina. Natalie, from you.
Mine is for people looking for paralegal roles. I know it's really competitive at the moment, but my advice from experience last year would be to, look elsewhere other than law firms. There's really great experience in NHS resolution or the civil service, and local charities such as Citizens Advice. They provide really great experience and diverse experience that aren't as competitive as law firms. So that would be my top tip for people looking for paralegal work.
Brilliant. And Sarah, you have the honour of the final top tip for us, please.
Yeah, I think for me, I would just advise you not to rush into something. I think it can sometimes feel like you absolutely have to finish your degree and then you have to do an LPC, or you have to go doing all the steps successively. And I think there is merit in sort of taking a breather and thinking, okay, I'm interested in this, I want to explore this first, and then you can always go back to doing it. So just don't rush.
Don't rush. A good note on which I have to rush through the final few comments just to say thank you to our earlier speakers, to Catherine, to Dan, and to Catherine, to setting the scene for us, and then to our live panel, to Georgina, to Sarah, and Natalie. Fantastic contributions, great honesty and insight that you have offered to many people who are sort of sitting in similar shoes to the ones that you have been, and indeed to a certain extent still are sitting in. So great advice, and very, very great to hear it from people in such comparable positions.